I hope that you're well. Today was my first day of my last year of uni and I had 7 hours of pathology lectures, so it's been a bit of a long day, but I'm home now. I've got a cup of tea. I saw 4 cats on my way back home from uni and I'm ready to talk about my knitting. I've got so much to talk about already that I can't put off filming this any longer. The light is going a bit crazy, so please bear with me. I'm gonna do my best to fix it when I'm editing this, but I have a lot to share today. Most of that I think is kind of a result of what I call exam stress knitting. I had exams earlier this month and there was a lot of knitting going on while I was studying for those, but I think it worked. Exams went very well, so there's a lot to share there. There was also a lot of exam cast on itis, I think. So what I'm now kind of trying to do is try to finish off all of the things that I've started recently, but at the same time the cast on spirit hasn't really left me. So I've got so many ideas. I think it's the season. Autumn is my favorite season. I'm so happy. I just want to cast on all of the things. I have so many ideas. So I'm trying to contain myself somewhat, but yeah, there's a lot going on. I also have a little bit of new yarn that I picked up while I was on holiday. I think I have 3 finished objects. I don't know how many whips I've got. I think probably 4 or 5. And I've also got an announcement for a knit along that I'm co-hosting with Flaminia from Knitting Flam. But I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later because it's relevant to one of the projects I've currently got on the needles. So we'll get back to that in a second. I think we can maybe start with what I think is the most exciting finished object today, which I don't think is one you have seen before. I think last time I probably just ordered the yarn because I think I filmed the podcast like mid-August when I came back from the seaside. So I think I would have just placed the order for the yarn and I was still waiting for it to arrive, but I hadn't cast on yet. But since then I've cast this on and finished it off, and that is my jacket number 2. This is going to be terribly difficult to show. I'm going to try to take like decent b-roll so you can actually see the texture on this, because this is an all over cable cardigan, but black knits are notoriously difficult to photograph. I don't actually think, and I think this is very important to point out because I think this is a big misconception in knitting, I don't think black doesn't work for textured knit. I think textured knits look beautiful in black, and this, you can see the cables really well on this in real life. They're just incredibly difficult to photograph. So I'm gonna do my best to try and show it to you. But since I have it here, I'm also gonna show you, just so you can get an idea of what the cable pattern looks like. This is essentially the jumper version of the same pattern. It's another pattern by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I think this is letter number 29. I've also knit the number 15, which I think is the most popular in this series. I really like this cable design. I think it's really simple to knit. Like 90% of it is just rib, and I really like how simple and uniform it is. I think a lot of the time cable knits I find a bit overwhelming and a bit, I don't know, I just find them a bit much sometimes. I think this is just really simple, really timeless, really elegant, and I love it. And so I've knit a 3rd version of it essentially. The 2 jumpers I have are quite different from each other, and I think the cardigan is kind of a nice midway, I think. So the sweater number 15 was the first one I knit, and I knit that very off gauge. I believe that's meant to be knit at a 22 stitch gauge, and it's a drop shoulder construction, which is the same as this cardigan. So you cast on at the back of the neck, and then you work increases. You work a really beautiful increase where you basically end up having a cable running along the shoulder seam, and then you increase from there for the back panel, and then you pick up from the 2 halves of the back to knit the front sections. And then in this case for the cardigan, you don't join everything in the round underneath the neck, you just keep knitting until you join underneath the armhole. But obviously for the jumper, that's a round neck, and so you work the neck shaping and then you join together underneath that. The construction is very similar between the 2 patterns in terms of how the drop shoulder is worked, how the increases are worked and everything like that. I think the increases for the neckline are also shaped very similarly in all of these patterns. But because the gauge is different, the stitch counts are not exactly the same. So I did go back and check because I couldn't remember and I was curious to see it. They're not the same, but I do think if you wanted to figure it out, you could probably knit a cardigan version of the sweater number 15 without too many issues. The sweater number 29 on the other hand is a drop shoulder, so you cast on and you knit the 2 shoulder panels, and then you pick up stitches from one of the shoulder panels, cast on stitches for the back of the neck, and then pick up stitches from the other shoulder panel, and then you basically work the back panel from there. So you've got the 2 shoulder panels over here that then continue running along straight into the sleeve, and then you basically do the same thing for the front while shaping the front. So the shoulder construction between the 3 patterns is a bit different, but I think a lot of the techniques that I used are quite similar. Another thing that's kind of different between them is the sleeve decreases. So I think the sweater number 15 doesn't have any sleeve decreases. I did add some decreases to mine, but my number 15 is so different from what the pattern is even supposed to look like. I knit it at like a 30 something stitch gauge with a fingering weight yarn as opposed to a DK, which I think is what the pattern recommends, and it's a lot more fitted, and I added sleeve decreases as well, and it's a bit of a whole thing. The number 29 does have sleeve decreases, and the cardigan does as well, or she calls it a jacket, but I wouldn't really wear this as a jacket. Like, I feel like it's a cardigan. If you know what the difference is, I would love to know, because I see so many patterns listed as jackets, but I feel like they're cardigans. So I'd be curious to hear what you think about that. In any case, the sleeve decreases between the 2 patterns are actually not the same. I will put better close-ups so you can kind of see the difference, because I think it's quite interesting, and I wanted to do this sort of comparison since I've knit all 3 of the patterns. The main difference is that in the sweater number 29, you're essentially decreasing from 4 cables to 2. So you've got 2 cables that you're decreasing into 1 on one side, and 2 cables that you're decreasing into 1 on the other side of the center of the armhole, basically. And so that creates what I think is a really pretty look for the decreases. It's very symmetric, it's very even. I really like it. For the cardigan, you can't really do that because in the center of the armhole, you have an actual cable. You don't have the purl stitches in between the 2 separate cables. And so you can't do a symmetric decrease in the same way. So the way that she wrote it is you're still decreasing out 2 cables, but instead of going from 4 to 2, you're going from 3 to 1. And I don't think that looks as clean. I don't particularly like these sleeve decreases. I don't think they look very beautiful. I didn't really want to sit down and try to figure out like if there was a better way to do it. I think if I were to redo it, the only thing that I could really come up with would be to either do, because you decrease the width of 2 cables across the length of 2 cable repeats as well. So there's a cable row in the middle where you need to cable something, but you don't have the right number of stitches to do a regular cable. And so I think the 2 solutions there would have been to either do like 2 narrower cables. So instead of doing the 6 stitches, I think you probably could have done 4 and 4, or potentially I would do like a decrease from 2 cables to 1 on one side, and then from the remaining one with another one on the other side. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but instead of doing like the 3 cables to 1, I would kind of do it in sections, because I don't think the 3 to 1 looks very clean. That's just my personal opinion, and I just wanted to highlight the differences between these 3 patterns because I think it's quite interesting. And then obviously the cardigan doesn't really have a collar in the same way that the jumpers do. I think both jumpers have like a folded collar. The cardigan has just a double knit button band that runs all the way along. I really like double knit button bands. I think they look very clean. I'm very happy with that. All of the ribbing, I think on all of these projects, is just regular 1x1 rib. There's no twisted rib, nothing fancy. And all of the ribbing bind-offs are tubular bind-offs, which I did do. I really like doing a tubular bind-off. I know people don't like it and find it really tedious, but I like the repetitiveness of it. And even like the rows of double knitting, I don't mind. So always happy to do that and get a really clean result. Other than that, I thought the pattern was very clear. I liked it. I think part of it is also the fact that I have essentially knit this twice before, and so like any of the more complex things. I think the first time I knit the sweater number 15, that was, I believe that might have been like my second project back into knitting after years of not knitting, which was quite ambitious, but you start from what I think is the most difficult part of the pattern, which is the back shaping. And I remember being a little bit confused about that. It's really not very complicated. It's just make one left, make one right, and you know, increases on the purl side. But in this case, I'd already done all of that multiple times. It's really not a difficult cable pattern. I think if you've knit something before, if you know how to knit and purl and increase, this would probably be a good first cable type of pattern series. Not necessarily the cardigan, but if you prefer the sweater, I think the actual cable repeat itself is very simple. And you don't cable it very often. You do all of them on the same row, so you don't have to keep track of like 5 different charts or anything like that. It's very simple on that side of things. And I think my favorite things knitwear's patterns are always quite clearly written. The only mistake I found in this one was with the sleeve decreases, actually, because when you're working the decreases, she tells you to move the beginning of round marker 1 stitch into the cable. So your beginning of round marker is just before your 6 knit stitches that make up your cable. She tells you to move that 1 stitch into the cable, but then on the row before you're meant to cable it, she tells you to knit to 5 stitches before the beginning of round marker and then knit 5. So effectively you're knitting up to the beginning of round marker, and then she tells you to cable, but you don't have 6 stitches to cable. So do you do the cable with 5 stitches, but then that's asymmetric and doesn't really work. But I think because there's a note about it that tells you to remove the beginning of marker and then put it back in, I think it meant to just say knit 4, and so you knit effectively to 1 stitch before the beginning of round marker, and then you can do your cable normally. Probably that didn't make any sense to you if you've not actually knit the pattern, and I don't know if this is a mistake in multiple sizes. I knit the extra small, and it was a mistake that I found. I saw other people mention it in their Ravelry project pages as well, so I'm not imagining it. But I think I also saw other people mention that there were other errors in the pattern, but I think they have since been fixed. At least there were none that I spotted in my size. With that being said, I am really happy with the fit of the cardigan, but I did kind of change that a little bit. I didn't actively make any modifications to the pattern apart from lengthening the ribbing of the sleeves by like 1 centimeter. But the reason that my fit is a bit different is because I knit it at a bit of a tighter gauge. So I knit this in the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colorway, I believe this is Coal. Yeah, Coal. I bought 9 balls of this, ended up only using 8. I have like 5 grams left of my 8th one, but effectively I've got 1 left. And I think that by itself is a little bit of a thinner yarn than what's suggested in the pattern. I can't exactly remember what yarn she recommends, but I know that it's both the jacket number 2 and the sweater number 29 have a 20 stitch gauge, and I know that I met gauge for the number 29 using Santa's Gone Pig Int, which is a much thicker DK yarn. It's 90 something meters per 50 grams. The Heavy Merino by Knitting for Olive is 125 meters per 50 grams, so it's a much thinner DK weight-ish yarn. And because I was using a bit of thinner yarn, I was also a bit cautious about my needle size, because I was afraid that I would end up with a fabric that would be too sparse and see-through, and obviously this is a wool cardigan. I do want it to be quite a warm cardigan, and I am also not the biggest fan of particularly oversized garments. I like my garments to be a bit more fitted. I think the cardigan in and of itself is meant to have, I think the cardigan originally is meant to have like 25 to 30 centimeters of positive ease. I was going for closer to like 10 to 15 at most. So I went down a needle size from what she recommended it, and I knit the main portion of the body on 4.5 millimeter needles, and then I went down to 3.5 millimeters for the button band and the ribbing. That worked out really well. I got a fit that I'm really happy with. It's not tight, it does have a little bit of positive ease, but it's an amount that I'm comfortable with. It doesn't feel extremely oversized, and I feel like it's a good I don't know, it's a good fit that I can wear comfortably with high-waisted trousers and skirts, and I think it looks really nice on me. Because of that, however, I think my row gauge was a little bit shorter as well, and I added 1 centimeter to the ribbing of the sleeves, not because I thought the sleeves were going to be short, but because for some reason the sleeve, like the cuff ribbing, is meant to be 1 centimeter shorter than body ribbing, and I didn't like that. But I've tried it on, like I blocked it and I've since tried it on. I haven't got buttons on this yet, but it is otherwise done. I still feel like the sleeves are a tiny bit short, so because I do have yarn left over, I might actually go back and add another cable repeat just before the cuff. I'm probably going to cut it and add a cable repeat and then graft it back together. And that is entirely on me, just because I think my row gauge was a bit shorter than what was meant to be for the pattern anyways, and I didn't think of that. Or well, I tried it on and it seemed okay, but I think because I blocked it so the cables would relax and be quite like wide and not scrunched up, it maybe grew a lot in width but maybe shrunk a bit in length. So I think I'm probably gonna go back and add that, especially since I do have the yarn for it. I think it's not the end of the world. And then I've still got to find buttons for this, but otherwise super happy with it. I'm not going to be able to wear this for a while, I don't think, because it's nowhere near cold enough to wear it yet, but I'm really happy with my finished result. In terms of yarn, this was my first time using the heavy merino. I've used the Knitting for Olive regular fingering weight merino a bunch of times over the summer. I really like that yarn, and I was very curious to try the heavy merino. I think this definitely feels a bit different, and I've heard a lot of people say it. I think they also mention it on their website. To me, it just feels a lot drier. It doesn't feel scratchy. I wouldn't say it's not soft. It's just a lot drier, which is very interesting. But it was a very enjoyable knitting experience. I think the result is beautiful. The cables show up really nicely in it. It's definitely a yarn I would recommend and would purchase again. So I'm very happy overall with how this turned out. Definitely a very successful knit, and one that I'm very glad to have in my wardrobe. I think she's now just come out with like a short sleeve t-shirt pattern within this cable series as well, and I can definitely see myself making that for maybe this spring, but we'll see about that. Okay, I've talked about that for way too long. I'm gonna go through these very quickly. My next two finished objects are 2 pairs of socks. This one you've seen before, probably if you watch the podcast. I started these, I think, sometime in the spring, and then I knit the first one, and then I put them on hold, and then I knit another pair of socks, and then I've not touched socks like since, and my sock knitting mojo really only came back in August. So I went back and I finished these. These are probably the most comfortable, or like the best fitting pairs of socks that I've made so far. I think just because they're rib, they fit really well, they're very comfortable, I really like them. I love the colour scheme. These are knit in DROPS Fabel in the colourway Wheat for the main portion, and then the contrast cuff detail and the toes are woollentwine fibrestudio Ovis Sock in the colourway Maroon, I believe from the March or April collection. She's got the most beautiful September collection going out tomorrow night, and I really want to pick up like a burgundy coloured sock yarn to make myself some socks in October. But I made a pair of poet socks using this yarn, and then I've still got leftovers. I'm probably going to use it in a colourwork project at some point, but I thought this was a nice way to use up a little bit of it. And they're just like vanilla socks. They're 66 stitches on 2.25mm needles, and they're half twisted rib with a reinforced slip stitch heel flap and gusset. Nothing more to them. They're very comfortable. I don't mind knitting half twisted rib. Twisted rib I probably wouldn't do, but half twisted rib it's okay, and I think they look really neat and really nice. The other pair of socks is a little bit more exciting. Again, I'm going to try to put some nicer close-ups about them because they're black, but these were my Paris trip socks. I went on holiday to Paris with my best friend, and I wanted like a really simple portable project to bring with me for when we were on the train or public transport for the evenings at home. And I cast on a pair of socks. These are again knit in DROPS Fabel, colorway 400 black, and they're another pair of self-drafted socks, but this time they're lace. I think actually this is a pretty popular lace pattern at the moment because it's quite similar to, I believe it's called the Marielle blouse that everyone seems to be knitting on Instagram. I have been looking up this type of lace, pointelle type of lace, for a while, and I really wanted a pair of socks with it. And I actually started them with a different lace motif that ended up not working out, and then I frogged back and did this, and I'm really happy I did. I think that's so beautiful. So I did that, and then I did a picot edge for the cuff. I'd never done that before. It's so cute. So the way that you knit a picot edge is you knit like a bit of stockinette. So say you knit 10 rows of stockinette, then you do one row where you alternate knit sheet togethers and yarn overs, and then you knit another 10 rows of stockinette, and then technically I think you're supposed to knit your live stitches together with a cast on edge to fold it down. I knit these on 2.25mm wooden needles. I don't like wooden needles, I much prefer metal, but I was afraid that airport security would take metal needles away from me, and so I went and I bought myself a pair of wooden needles to make socks. They went through security fine, but I really did not trust myself to not break the wooden needles by doing that thing where you knit them together. And so I just waited until I was home and both were done, and I took a darning needle and a bit of this leftover yarn and I sewed it down. I think as long as you're careful to not pull your thread too tight, then they can get over my heel fine, and you know, they fit well. Really happy with it. Other than that, it is just my usual 64 stitches on 2.25mm needles and my reinforced slip stitch heel flapping gusset. Nothing more about them. I haven't done it yet, but I think I will like draw up a chart for what I did for this and put it on my Ravelry project page in case anyone wants to do it as well. It's quite simple. It's an 8 stitch repeat, so you can kind of go up a size or go down a size by adding or removing a repeat, I guess, even though you'd have to figure out how to make it fit nicely along the side, but I'll leave that to you to figure out. I'll put out the chart in case anyone knows how to make socks and wants to add that to a pair of plain vanilla socks. Okay, so that's it for my finished objects. Now, a little while back, me and Flaminia from Knitting Flam, she has a knitting podcast in case you don't know her. She makes really beautiful patterns as well. She started pattern designing I think earlier this year. We have been chatting on Instagram for a while, and we were, I think, saying how we were really excited to cast on our festive jumpers for the year, and she told me that she was thinking about hosting like a Christmas jumper knit along and asked me if I wanted to help her with it. And so we are co-hosting the Christmas pullover knit along over on Instagram. Today as I'm filming this, and hopefully tonight as you're watching this, we are technically starting the knit along. And it's going to be quite a long time span. We are holding it from the 25th of September to the 25th of December. So there's people that are still waiting for their yarn and that haven't really decided what pattern they want to knit yet. There's no rush for it, but we were very excited and we really wanted to share the excitement with people. And so many people have joined already and are sharing their ideas and their yarn, and so I'm really happy with how it's going so far. So if you want to join, we're going to have all of the details. We've made a post over on Instagram. I'm probably going to post about it on the community page as well, and I'll leave the details in the description so you can find all of that written down as well. But if you want to join, DM either of us on Instagram and we're going to send you the invite link to the group. So it is a knit along specifically for like festive and Christmas jumpers. We've not really put like very specific boundaries about that, because I think what a festive jumper is can differ a lot for different people. And there's people that are making very explicitly Christmassy jumpers with like reindeers and Christmas trees and whatever. But we also have, I know there's someone that's very much beginner knitting that's just making like, I think it's a Monday sweater by Petit Knit in a bright red yarn. Someone else is also making like bright red cardigan. That's a lot of really cool colorwork patterns going on. Some really fun cable patterns too. So we're not being too strict with our definition of a festive or a Christmas jumper, but it does have to kind of fall within that theme. We've been asked by a couple of people, so I thought I would clarify it. We've put a couple of pictures of like inspiration, I guess, that you could take for it. If you're unsure, feel free to text us, we'd be happy to help. But it's a very chill thing, but we do, you know, we do have a theme. So with that, I've cast on my own Christmas jumper. I actually cast this on before the knit along started. I did not cast on today. And I don't know if I mentioned, but we are accepting whips. You don't have to finish it by the end of the knit along. Like, it's all very chill. We're just here to keep each other company and keep each other motivated, because we know that a lot of these are going to be like pretty intricate, like cable or colorwork projects, and it's nice to have someone to motivate you along a bit of a bigger task, I suppose. This was very much part of my exam stress cast on. So I cast it on, I think probably, I don't know, first week of September, and I've made a nice bit of progress. This is the Northern Augustins number 4 by Augustins DK or Anne-Sophie Velling. I've been wanting to make this since Christmas last year, but I'd already made my colorwork jumper for the winter, and I just started knitting again at that point, and I think after that I probably started thinking about spring knitting. This just kind of got put to the side, but I knew that I wanted this to be my festive jumper, and so here we are. This is a round colorwork yoke construction. Again, it's a fairly oversized garment that I'm making a little bit more of a fitted version of. I don't think this is going to be as dramatic. I still think this is going to be fairly oversized, but I have gone down a needle size as well for this. So far I've used 4.5 millimeters for the ribbed collar, 5.5 millimeters for the colorwork portion, and 5 millimeters for the body, and I'm now working on a sleeve. I think in the pattern actually she only tells you to use 2 needle sizes, and she doesn't tell you to go up a needle size for the colorwork section, which I think is fine, but a lot of people's colorwork tension tends to be a bit tighter compared to the regular non-colorwork stockinette. And just to be on the safe side, I did go up a needle size. I did also try a bit of a new technique for me for the colorwork portion. Normally when I'm knitting colorwork, I will catch my floats, and I find that perfectly okay. I'm happy to do that. However, in this case, because my contrast is quite high, I'm using like a light cream as my main color and a bright red as my contrast color. I knew that if I caught floats in the red, those were just going to show through to the front side of the garment, and I did not want that to happen. And so what I did for the top part of the yoke is I did a technique called ladder back jacquard. I will put a video in the description, which is a video I used to like learn how to do the technique, which I think is fairly well explained. It gives you a few different options. Essentially, the aim of the technique is to cast on stitches in the contrast color that you would want to catch floats in on the back side of the work, and then every row when you encounter those stitches, you purl them. So effectively you have a column of from the inside they look like knit stitches, but when you're working them, because you're working them from the right side, you work them as purl stitches. You get these columns of knit stitches in your contrast color where you would typically catch your floats, and it just anchors down the color, and for me it really helps keep more of an even tension. I actually didn't do it in the point that I think in the pattern is probably the most like difficult section, which is just at the end of the bows. Basically one like leg of the bow is longer than the other, and so between these two you end up having, I think, probably like 8 or 9 stitches, and I would normally want to catch a float between those, but it's only like 3 rows that you've got to do that for, and I didn't want to set up the ladder back jacquard because it does take a while, and then knit that for 1 row and then bind it off again. It just felt like a lot of faff, and by that point I knit enough of the yoke that I felt okay in my tension, and because it was only for 3 rows I felt okay not doing it. But I'm really glad I did for all this top section, because I think it did help me keep my tension a bit more even. especially across such a long number of rows. This is definitely still gonna relax when I block it. I do have a tiny bit of puckering, but it's quite stretchy still, so I'm very happy with it. And this bottom section is also, like where the bows are, is also quite stretchy, so I'm happy with that. In terms of the colour work, however, this is not a very simple colour work pattern. So if you've never knit colour work before, I don't know that I would necessarily recommend this. I definitely recommend the Celeste sweater that I knit last year. It's another pattern by Petit Knit. That, I think the longest float you have is like 3 stitches. So you don't have to catch floats at all. And it's really good practice because you're switching your colour all the time. So I feel like it's really good colour work practice without being too difficult. Even if it looks potentially more intimidating than this because it's got 5 colours in the yoke. But I definitely think that is a better colour work beginner pattern, and it's the same round yoke construction. I will actually be talking more about that soon because I'm knitting one for my best friend for his Christmas present. So that will be like my main project for the knit along actually, because I don't think this is going to take too long to get finished at all. Because it's knit on such large needles, this is flying by. But I am now working on one of the sleeves. So I did a little bit of the body after the colour work. I actually added short rows to the back of this. I don't know if you can tell, but the back is longer than the front. The pattern does not have short rows, but because it's got such a high neck, I didn't feel very comfortable not having any short rows in this. I'm also using a fairly rustic yarn, which I will talk about in a second. So I don't want it to feel too tight or feel like it's pulling back or anything, because I don't think that that is going to be comfortable at all. So I did add short rows to this. I've put details of how I did that on the Ravelry project page for this. Do be mindful that the stitch counts really only work for the size that I'm knitting, which is size A, mostly because you have your beginning of round mark here. Originally, I think it's underneath the right, or for me, it's underneath the right armhole. But in order to work the short rows, you've got to move it to the middle of the back, so then you can work your short rows back and forth across that, and then I've moved it back to underneath the armhole. But the amount of stitches that you're going to have on the back panel differs for the different sizes, and so I've moved mine back, I think 30 stitches, but if you're knitting a medium or a large, it's going, or it goes by letter sizes, but still, if you're knitting like a D or an E or whatever, it's going to be a different number of stitches that you need to move it back for. And you might also want to make your short rows longer than I did mine, because you're gonna have more stitches. But I've put details on how I did that on my Ravelry, and I think it's worked really well. I'm very happy that I did it. It was very simple to do, and I've now split underneath the armholes. I finished the first cake of yarn that I had attached to it for the body, and then I'm now working the 2 sleeves, and then I'm going to be finishing the body with all the rest of the yarn that I've got. I don't quite have enough yarn for what the pattern recommends, which is fine. I always like have too much yarn because I make everything a bit cropped, and I'm also not making this as oversized because I went down a needle size, but I would rather not take any risk and end up with one sleeve shorter than the other, so I'd rather do the sleeves first and then I'm going to do the body later. Yarn wise, I really wanted this to be like a stash yarn project for the main yarn. I've had this yarn in stash since last winter. I had 4 cakes of this. So this is the Istex Plotulopi, which is 100% unspun Icelandic wool. I had 3 cakes of the white and 1 in, actually I've got it here, and 1 in this like really lovely rust color. And I was gonna use them to make the Hitter sweater pullover by Saskia & Co. I was having some troubles with it. I was having a lot of laddering going on for the collar. Because this is an unspun yarn, if you pull in it, it's just gonna break, like that just comes apart. And you can felt it back together very easily. If you just rub it together, it's gonna stick back to itself and you can knit with it again. But because of that, you can't really like pull very tight when you're doing magic loop for short circumferences, and as a consequence of that I was getting a lot of laddering down the sides, so I never actually got like past the collar section of it. And then I was looking back at it and thinking about picking it back up for this winter, and I just wasn't convinced by the colour palette. I think to pair with this rusty colour I would want more of a muted beige, and to pair with this white I wanted a brighter red. So I ended up getting some yarn when I was in Paris. I guess this is technically an acquisition, but it's already been and gone on the needles because the colourwork section is finished. Though I am actually debating adding some bows to the cuffs, or like to just before the cuffs. To be decided. But when I was in Paris, we went to a shop, we went to a yarn shop called Little Weasel that I really was very curious to visit, and they had a really lovely little shop. It's actually like 3 sections of the shop inside like a gallery. And I picked up some of the Fonty BB Merinos, which is a fingering weight yarn. It's 200 meters per 50 grams. But I held this double. I had 2 balls of this. I think one probably would have been enough, but I didn't want to be pulling 2 strands from the same ball and get it all tangled up with this kind of thing. It always gets tangled up for me. So I thought I'd rather buy 2, make sure I've got enough, and I'm going to use the rest of it for something at some point. But I think this looks a lot nicer together, and it feels very Christmassy, and I'm very happy with it. However, I also wanted to hold the Plotulopi with something in order to somewhat meet gauge for this. I did end up going down a needle size, but my gauge is still quite close to what the pattern recommends. And so I picked up some mohair. Normally, I'm not the biggest fan of this mohair, like holding mohair with everything trend. I'm very happy to just have 1 strand for my project and not have to buy 2 sweater quantities of yarn to make a single jumper. It gets expensive, and I also, like, mohair is fine, but not the biggest fan of it. I think I'd like to make some mohair only pieces. I think that would be really nice, but I don't necessarily have to have it in a project. However, in this case, I think it's a really smart choice. First of all, I picked up a little bit of a cooler toned colour. This is the Knitting for Olive mohair. I ordered it when I ordered the heavy merino for the jumper, or the cardigan rather. And this is the colourway Limestone. I got 4 balls of it. And so, first of all, I like that it tones down the cream of the Plotulopi a little bit, because this is not a very like true white, it's definitely a bit warm toned. But in the jumper, it's turning out to be quite neutral, which I like, or at least the cream isn't as strong. But also, because this is an unspun yarn, holding it with a mohair makes it so much easier and so much more enjoyable to work with, because you can pull on it as tight as you need to, because the mohair is kind of going to take that impact, and the unspun is kind of getting dragged alongside it, but it's not breaking every time that you pull on it. And so it's been a really enjoyable knitting experience. I will definitely be holding this yarn with mohair again. I would also be curious to try holding it double and see how I feel about that. But I am really enjoying working with all of these yarns. This one is 100% superwash merino, I think. I would definitely use this for like a give knit if I needed to make something for someone and I wanted like a really nice soft yarn. So I really like it. I don't know how easily I can get it here, but it's not too complicated for me to order from France. So I might be using Fonty again. I'm not particularly sensitive to mohair, and I've only ever used one other mohair before, so not much room for comparison, but I am really enjoying the Knitting for Olive mohair. It's nice and fluffy. It doesn't feel scratchy at all to me. I find it really soft, and I think, yeah, it's been really nice to work with. The Plotulopi, I know a lot of people find very itchy. I seem to be okay with it. I've tried this on. This has felt okay. When I made the collar last time, I like kept it on for a while to see if it felt itchy. It felt fine. So I think this is going to be okay for me, and I felt confident enough that I could do a high collar jumper with it. I will say, however, I've also tried the Lopi by the same brand, by Istex. That feels like sandpaper to me. This, nothing at all. So definitely, like, if you've tried the Lopi, don't think that this is the same, because at least to me it's very much not. So overall, I'm very, very happy with how this is going. I have, as I said, I've just started working on the first sleeve. I think I'm gonna add some decreases to it because like the sleeve is massive. And I know that that's kind of meant to go with the pattern because it's meant to be quite oversized, but I don't think a gigantic sleeve is going to be very practical for me. So I think I'm gonna do like some very gradual decreases, probably only like 5 or 6, maybe even less, maybe just 4. And then I'm not quite read all the way through the pattern, I don't think, or maybe I did and I forgot, but I think you don't decrease before the cuff and you're meant to have quite a wide cuff, or at least I've seen that on other people's projects for sure. I don't want a wide cuff for sure, so if the pattern doesn't already have you do that, I am gonna do like very rapid decreases just before the cuff, and then I'm gonna do my cuff so it'll give like more of a balloon shape. But I think just having the tighter fitting cuff will be a lot more practical for me, even just to put on coats, but also like when I'm at lectures, when I'm out and about, it's gonna be a lot more comfortable. So that's the other thing that I'm thinking about. Again, I don't know, like I've been thinking about maybe adding another row of bows because I've got leftover contrast yarn, so I might do that, but I don't know if that would be too much color work for me. We'll see. In any case, I'm really, really happy with how this is turning out. And actually, a lot of us are going to be making this jumper for the knit along. I've seen at least like 3 or 4 other people that want to make this as their festive jumper this year, which is very exciting, and I can't wait to see like all of the different color palettes that people choose. Okay, only a couple of smaller whips left. I do actually have more on the needles. I made a little bit of progress on the campanulity. I finished the body on that, but I think at this point I'm just gonna show it and probably like wrap up and talk about it once it's done, which is hopefully gonna be soon because it would be like really good weather to wear like a long sleeve lightweight knit top, something like this, but a knit version. So I really want to get back to that and finish it. But knitting those sleeves on 2.5mm needles is taking forever, and I want to make it long sleeved. So yeah, hopefully it'll be next month. But I have that, and I have another pair of socks that I've not made any progress on, but I do have another single sock, so now I have like 2 single socks, neither of which have a brother or sister. But I knit this with some yarn that I picked up in Paris as well. It's a bit chaotic because I cast on the second one not yesterday night but the night before, and then I had to unravel because I messed up like the stitch pattern on the first row. But I picked up some Filcolana Arvetta. I also have some more that I'll talk about later. I really wanted to make myself a pair of red socks for like the beginning of autumn, I guess. So I got a skein of this. This is only 50 grams. I kind of panicked when I was in the shop, and I don't think I thought about the fact that I might want more than 50 grams for any of the sock yarn that I bought. Realistically, I can get a pair of socks out of 50 grams of yarn. All of the socks that I showed earlier were made with like one single 50 gram skein, and this is less than 25 grams, and it's a very well fitting sock for me. It's not blocked and it's ribbed, so it looks a bit flimsy and a bit ridiculous, but it does fit really well. And it's like, it's a shorty, but it's not that short, I guess. It still kind of peeks out of my low-rise Doc Martens, and I think it's gonna look really good. But because of that, I am bound to make shorties with all of the socks, with all of the sock yarn that I picked up there. In any case, that is what I wanted for this pair of socks specifically. So I'm just making a plain like 2x1 rib vanilla sock. Again, 2.25mm needles. In this case, it's 63 stitches. Because I needed that to work for the 3-stitch repeat. And then my usual reinforced heel flap. The only thing I did differently in this case is I did an anatomical toe. So you can see it's like slanted to one side, which I think fits my foot shape better. My other socks, like all of the socks that I've made so far, all have like your regular wedge toe, I guess, which fits okay for me, but I thought I'd be curious to try. Hopefully you can see the difference against like the somewhat wide wall. So I've done the right one. I'm gonna go ahead and start the left one, I think. I'm hoping to make that over the weekend. These are quite quick to work up anyways, so I might bring this as my early weekend project and actually finish them so I can get one project out of the way. So yeah, not much to say about these, but I am very happy with how the first one turned out. And then I cast on another project with some yarn that is actually also an acquisition. I picked up some DROPS alpaca in my local yarn store the other week while I was at Knit Night, because I've been eyeing up this shawl pattern. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I believe it's called the dröm shawl, and it's a pattern by Coquelicot, which also I've probably mispronounced. But it's a really simple like triangle garter stitch shawl with a beautiful lace border around the bottom edge. So I've made a little bit of progress. You work the shawl top down, working essentially increases along the middle and along the two sides, and it's all just garter stitch, so you're just knitting and doing increases, and it's very simple. And I wanted this to bring with me to uni once it's finished, so I can like kind of just keep it in my backpack and put it on my shoulders if I ever get cold, which like this morning I would have liked something like that. So I'm very excited to have this finished. But also as knitting for my commute to uni, I was working on it today, and it's really easy, like knitting for when I'm on the tube. Anyways, you work the shawl top down, and then once you're finished, I think you work the lace border sideways around the bottom like two sides of the triangle. And I love that little lace detail. I think it's going to be so fun to knit. It's also got a cable running all the way along. I think that's going to be so fun. I'm not the biggest fan of garter stitch, like it's okay, but I don't love it. But I am very much looking forward to the lace, and I think it's going to be a really nice occasion to knit lace for the colder season where you wouldn't necessarily typically wear cold garments. But the pattern recommends an alpaca yarn. It recommends a different alpaca yarn to this, but with the exact same meterage, and so I picked up 150 grams for this, which is what the pattern recommends, and I am knitting it on the recommended needle size, which I think is 3.5. Yeah, 3.5 millimeters. So I've done the first bit. I think it's probably like, I don't know, 12 to 15 centimeters tall now, but I'm only like a third of the way through with the increases. It's gonna be not a gigantic shawl, but like just big enough that you can tie it in the front. It does also have tassels that you can add to the two like front points. I'm not gonna do that, I don't love tassels, but I'm really looking forward to the rest of it. So I think this will be like my commute knitting for the time being. And that's what I've been working on at the moment. As I said, I do have a little bit of acquisitions, and I also frogged, or am in a process of frogging, some other pieces. So as if this episode wasn't long enough, because I'm sure I've been talking for like an hour already, I am going to talk a little bit about my upcoming plans as well, because I would like to cast on everything at the moment, and I'm trying not to because I will just overwhelm myself, and also there's no point to it. I don't like having that many whips, but I at least want to share the excitement with someone. So first of all, in terms of acquisitions, I have 2 more sock yarns that I picked up also while I was in Paris. I got one more skein of the Arvetta by Filcolana, which I don't know if I mentioned earlier. It's an 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, very like standard sock yarn composition, but it is merino. This one is also merino. I've never knit with merino yarn before. It's been really interesting on the red socks actually. It feels a lot more slippery than non-merino wool sock yarn, and I think it's also looking quite fuzzy already, so I'm really curious to see how it holds up to wear, especially in boots, because I wear my socks in boots all the time. But I also got this in a really lovely like dark grey, really warm toned grey, or like almost on the brown side. I don't quite know what I want to make with this. I don't know if I want to do cables or more ribbing, or because I might not actually have enough for cables. I do wish I'd picked up another one of these, but I can't find Arvetta locally, so I'm just gonna make a pair of shorties with this anyways. And then I also picked up a skein of Soxier by Coop Knits in this really beautiful light grey, which I think is coming across quite cool tone on camera. The lighting is like completely going. I hope I can edit that to not look like I'm in a cave. But it's actually quite a warm toned light grey, and I think this will look really nice for lace, or just I'm envisioning a very delicate pair of socks. There's a pattern coming out, I think maybe this week by In Her Skein. I think they're going to be called the Agrimonia socks, and I'm really looking forward to knitting those. I think this might be an option for them, so we'll see about that, because I have some more upcoming sock yarn acquisitions, so I will see once I have some of my current projects cast off what yarn I have at the moment and what I'm feeling inspired by to knit those socks. Other than that, as I mentioned, I frogged 2 different projects recently. I frogged my skirt number 1, which is another pattern by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I knitted last winter. It never fit quite right. It was just too tight fitting for me. It didn't have like that A-line shape of a skirt that I really wanted. So I think I might knit something similar again, but I would like rewrite the rate of increases for like to make a skirt that actually fits me how I want. And I knit that using the Laine du Nord Vasto, which is 100% wool. I think it's like a worsted weight, and I didn't want that to just go to waste. So I frogged the project, I washed the yarn so I could get all of the like noodly shape out of it, and I've caked it back up, and I'm planning on using this to make the Obsidian Slipover, I think, or the Obsidian Vest by Knitting Siri. I've been eyeing up this pattern since it came out. I was a bit unsure about it. I don't have any vests. I've never worn vests before, but I think I would really like to knit that. It's got a bow at the front. I am very much in love with the bow trend, and I think that is something I could get a fair amount of wear out of. And if anything, I'm just curious to knit it, and if it doesn't work out again, I can frog it again and reuse the yarn another time. Like, I'm not afraid to do that. So that's the plan for this. I've also been frogging, I've only done the sleeves so far, but I crocheted a sweater last year. It was like an all-over cable jumper that I self-drafted. Again, that didn't really fit quite right. I think it was a great learning experience, and I had a lot of fun doing that, and that was just before I picked up knitting again. But I used some nice wool for that. It's a 100% wool yarn by Tresfere, and it's called Lana Bioecologica, I believe. And it's like an Aran to bulky weight yarn, I think. It's 100 meters per 100 grams. So I don't really know like in what category that puts it, because I don't knit with this category of yarn normally. But I frogged it, and my plan is to use this to make myself like an at-home jumper. Hopefully, I did swatch for this. I think I can get like a 15 to 16 stitch gauge. So I've been eyeing up some of the Ozetta patterns, something like the Winter's pullover, or like the Port pullover, something like that. I think something like nice and a little bit oversized and really cozy would be really nice, and it's a lovely grey yarn. So I'm looking forward to reusing that. Might be a little bit later, more towards the winter, but I thought, since I've been frogging it, I thought I would share it as well. I do, however, at least need to give this a steam because it's very scrunched up. But I think it's getting a little bit too cold, and like we've had a lot of rain, so it's quite humid. So I don't trust myself to wash this and to have it dry properly without like taking forever and getting moldy or anything. I don't want to risk it, so I might just have to steam it and hope for the best. I've also started swatching for a little something different. I've been thinking for a while that it might be fun to knit myself like a fairly fine gauge plaid pattern knit skirt, and I had that idea. I've been looking up like ways that you can achieve a plaid-like look with knitting, and there seem to be like I think 3 main different ways. I'm not going to go too in depth about it now. I do want to swatch for all of them, and I think hopefully next time, I don't think I will have started the project yet, but hopefully I will have some more swatches to show you so you can kind of understand better. But I was watching a video by Lauren Penrose that she posted on Patreon like yesterday or the day before, and she also just swatched for something very similar, for like a plaid looking knit pattern. And I just got very excited about it, and so I cast on a gigantic swatch for it yesterday night. I drew up the chart and all. This is garter stitch because it's like one of the 3 ways that you can kind of do it. So it's garter stitch, stripes, and then you weave in just like vertical strands of yarn through the pearl bumps, which is really interesting, and I think it's actually looking quite good. It's not exactly the colours I would go for, but it's like close enough. Most of this is pig-inned by Santa's Garn. It's all like scrap yarn that I got from different projects. And then the black is Merino Cot by Lanagatto, which is the yarn that I use for my knit dress. And I'm only using that for some of the vertical stripes. I think it's looking quite good. I wanted to do quite a big swatch to make sure I had like 2 repeats so I could actually kind of see the pattern on a bit of a wider scale. But I think it's actually feeling like quite solid. I think for a skirt I would want to go smaller gauge. I'm knitting this on 4mm needles. I probably want to go at least down to 3.5 and use a bit of thinner yarn. But I've been wanting to use up the scrap yarn anyways, and I have some more as well if I run out. But I think I would like to just maybe do like 1 or 2 more repeats vertically and then knit another one and make like a pouch. Or if I run out sooner, I can always like fold it in half and use it as like a little coin pouch or something. I don't know, I feel like it would be like a nice use of scrap yarn anyways, because I've been trying to find a way to do something with this regardless. I might actually not have enough of this to do the same on the other side, but I guess I could switch like my 2 red colors around, because I have quite a lot of the deeper Bordeaux and not too much of the lighter one, which I use as my main color in this case, but I could kind of switch them around for the other side. So yeah, thought I would also share that because it feels quite exciting and a bit different, and I'm really curious to swatch for the other methods and kind of see what I prefer and what I like best, and then hopefully at some point actually cast on a plaid looking skirt for myself, because I would really like one and I think it would be really fun to make. So I think that's it. I've rambled on for long enough. You're probably sick of hearing me talk. The light is completely gone. I want to go have dinner. So I hope that you have made progress on whatever you've been knitting on this time, if you have been knitting on something. I hope that you are having a really lovely day, and hopefully I will catch you up very soon with another video. Have a nice evening. Bye!